Singing Dutchman Productions.
Hi, this is Tom Lacko from State College, Pennsylvania, and you're listening to Doug's Front Porch.
Hi everybody, Doug here. I just wanted to give you a quick heads up that this episode I had to record using Zoom instead of the program Zencastr that I normally use due to some technical difficulties. So the audio is going to sound a little bit rougher than it normally does, but I guarantee you there's tons of great conversation here in this week's episode. So please sit back and enjoy my conversation with the one and only Dave Kline. Hello and welcome to Doug's Front Porch, a podcast where I get to sit down with friends old and new and have honest conversations. Today I welcome to the front porch Dave Kline, what I would sometimes say a new friend, but I feel like I've known you forever, Dave. Thanks for coming on to the show and welcome to Doug's Front Porch.
Hey, thanks for having me. Doug's Front Porch, so comfy and cozy and no snow or inclement weather.
That's right, even though outside says something totally different. Dave, I want to start by saying, growing up in Berks County where I did, WEEU was just part of everyday life. I would get up in the morning and the radio was on. And when we'd go to bed at night in the summer, the radio was on with the Phillies games and so forth. And my uncle, who was born a paraplegic and lived with my grandparents, he was the one that I spent a lot of time with him. He was the one that introduced me to you and your radio program when I was a child. So when I say I feel like I've known you forever, I feel like I do. So I just wanted to thank you that I know you brought a lot of joy to him in the music that you played and your radio show. So I want to thank you for that. I know you made his life, you brought joy to his life and mine as well over the years. And that's why I'm so excited to sit down and pick your brain a little bit about some things.
Wow, that's a really lovely story. And I always thought in the broadcasting business, especially with radio, that there's this intimacy between the broadcaster and the audience, and it's that theater of the mind situation where you can create images and have people feel like they're right at home. And even something like listen to the Phillies broadcast, you kind of like get invested in it emotionally. You feel like it's your best friend there, and good local radio broadcasting, that's the way it should be. So that was really fulfilling for me. That's why I spent 40 years in that profession. I'm glad that you shared that story with me. Thank you.
Well, Dave, let's start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about your childhood. Where did you grow up? And what was young Dave Kline like?
Oh boy. Well, my mom was a dance instructor, and she was a professional dancer, and she traveled with a guy by the name of Frank Fontaine, who came out of vaudeville, and maybe his big claim to fame was instead of a dancer and showman entertainer, he appeared on the Jackie Gleason television show as a character by the name of Crazy Guggenheim. Now, most people, unless they're of a certain age, won't remember that, but you can look it up, and it's worth seeing. And anyway, so she traveled around, and so I was kind of raised in an entertainment or a mode where that's what we did. One of my grandfathers was a conductor and French horn first chair player for Reading Symphony Orchestra and Ringgold Band and Italian American Band and several other things. He, among his claims to fame, he went to perform for the first inauguration of Franklin Delano Roosevelt with the Ringgold Band, which is a historic band from Berks County. And then when John Philip Sousa passed away in the Abraham Lincoln Hotel, which was right near then what they call the Raja Theater. Some call it the Raya. Anyway, John Philip Sousa was rehearsing for a gig with the Ringgold Band, and my grandfather was there, and they rehearsed, and then Sousa went across the street and promptly passed away. And so it fell onto my grandfather to organize the funeral train. Back then, funeral trains for certain celebrities, and Sousa was like the Beatles of his day. I mean, like big, like star, right? And it was they organized the funeral train because trains used to be a big deal back then. So my grandmother always told me a story. She remembered a cold March day when Sousa's funeral train left the outer station of Reading, and there were thousands of people there. And, I don't know how many, 100 or so, maybe more, maybe less, but more or less she always just said musicians from every band in the community and beyond, and your grandfather coordinated that. So anyway, that part on that side of my family, it's sort of been in my DNA and in my blood. So what was I like when I was a little kid? First accordion lessons at 5 years of age, first stage appearance in kindergarten as the skunk in, I was Flower, I think the skunk in Bambi. I think there's a character named Skunk, or Flower, the skunk in Bambi. So we did a live play, and that was my first role. I was a skunk. And I probably haven't strayed too far from that sort of a typecast role.
So it really is that performing and music is in your blood, which is so awesome to hear. And I'm so glad that you have cultivated that over the years, of course. So when did you start picking up? So you started with accordion, you said. When did you really get into like stringed instruments? I know you love banjo and all acoustic instruments, but what got you in that vein?
I played my accordion up until the time my mom made me take it to school band rehearsals at Muhlenberg High School, and the director, by the name of Hank Hoffman. Here were all these kids waiting to try out for the band with their saxophones and their drums and their other stuff. And I showed up with an accordion, and he saw me take the accordion out of the box, and he looked at me in front of everybody. Now imagine being an impressionable young man in front of girls and peers and stuff. And he said, "Oh my gosh, take that squeeze box home." So then I took up the sax because I was mortified. I was so embarrassed by it. And I wish I would have kept playing the accordion now, because now I would love to play the accordion, But anyway, sax. And then, the Beatles came along, to be honest, and that changed my life, that kind of music. And you had 4 guys, and 3 of them had some sort of guitar. And I was like, wow, this is amazing, the music you get. So I worked I got myself a guitar, and I borrowed guitars and so forth. And I took lessons, and my first lessons were on acoustic guitars and ironically banjo, because the guy that was teaching me guitar told me a story. I was really interested in it. He was a friend's grandfather, and at the time I was 12 and he was 83, and he used to play in a ragtime Dixieland band, and his name was Charlie Prutzman. And imagine, we have all these great internet things now, like Zoom and all this kind of stuff, or digital recording at the touch of a finger. And what we did back then, now this is 50 years ago. This is half a century ago. And his surviving friends, he'd tell me the stories about traveling up to the coal regions and, into the Catskills and stuff to play these big gigs and all these fancy people. And they'd be dancing and really tearing it up to this ragtime Dixieland music, and how he'd play the banjo because it was loud enough to keep track with the horns. And I should really learn a banjo too, if I want to know show business. And what he'd do is he'd play his banjo, and after he taught me some guitar chords, he would call his friends. I'd go to his place. He'd call his friends. He had like 3 surviving friends at that age. And he'd say like, "Hey, John, this is Charlie. Hey, me and Davey are going to tear it up for you." And then he'd say, "Go ahead, Davey, let's play Hand Me Down My Walking Cane," or Golden Slippers, or Grandfather's Clock. Those were his favorites. And we'd play these little live shows for like 3 songs. Every week he'd call his friends, and he'd drink a little bit of Old Granddad. Back then I didn't really know what that was, and he certainly didn't offer it to me, but he'd have a little Old Granddad, and we'd play our songs. And I learned the stringed instruments of guitar and banjo. Really, I would attribute it to him. So then I told you about the Beatles, and then I was playing and touring and traveling with bands, rock and roll bands, pop bands, cover bands, original bands. And I found it kind of very unfulfilling. I really liked the original stuff, and I kind of got burned out on it quickly. And just about that same time, another friend of mine, a couple of friends of mine felt the same way. And I decided like, hey, did you ever see that Beverly Hillbillies? Or did you ever see like the movie Bonnie and Clyde? Or did you ever, any of those shows, like Deliverance? How about Deliverance? Oh, they go, "Oh my God, Deliverance, that's a terrible movie." I said, "But the music's really good. It's got a lot of energy." And so it turns out that the same energy that's in rock and roll, for me anyway, can manifest very easily in bluegrass music, because it's all about the tempos and the tight rhythms and the backbeats. So then I started a bluegrass band, and at the height of that, we'd work like 3-4 gigs a week, every week. And this was after doing our day job, and we had a great time. And so that led its way to folk festivals and things like Pennsylvania German events, and just more of an exploration of culture. And at the same time, I really love history, just like you do. really love history and traditions and folklore. And so that kind of acoustic music, when I circled back on it, after I'd gone through the thing of working to buy an electric guitar and then, so forth and so on, I circled back to the acoustic side because it was really something. You could either play the stuff or you couldn't, and it really came from the heart. You really had to put yourself in it to deliver it to the audience, especially if you were just acoustic and there wasn't a PA system or something. And knowing that led me to understand like what a Shanakian is, like an Irish Celtic person who can tell stories through their songs, and doing all that research of the early Appalachian Mountains. So yeah, I'd say I've been pretty immersed in it for the last 40 years. I just love it.
You absolutely have been, and it's a testament to everything that you've been doing, that you have exposed people that probably never would have had access to that type of music over the years to that music. And I can't thank you enough for that. I know personally my introduction to bluegrass and mountain music was through your radio show. So you kind of touched on this, but I want to pick your brain a little bit deeper. You talked about how bluegrass, of course, has that energy and that drive, but I want to talk a little bit about folk music particularly. What is it about folk music to you that makes it so, for a lack of a better word, special? When I listen to folk music, for me, old folk songs tell a story so much better than any pop song that's out there. What is it for you about old music, songs that are over 100 years old or 200 years old or even older sometimes, that make them still relevant to listeners today?
The passage of information from one generation to the next through song. Before there were instruments, there was the voice, and so there's this oral tradition out of your mouth and into your ear. So it's ORAL, and of course, AURAL. And it's a wonderful thing, because if you're going to try and pass along the lessons of life to the next generation, if they're interested, the only way to do that is to either tell them, or nowadays, I guess we write it down and so forth. But I would rather sit and listen to a song or a story than read a long text on the internet, although I do a lot of research on the internet. There's a program called We Are the Champions, and it has nothing to do with the Queen song, except that it kind of takes the name of the song. And at the very beginning of that program, the narrator, and I wish I could remember it, he says something about why traditions are important. And it's kind of summed up in what I said. I paraphrased it, but it really struck a deep chord with me, because it's that desire to research what you've done, whether it's music or even heirloom seeds, and then pass it along to try and make the world a better place. If being philosophical here, I think about this a lot, especially as you get older, like, well, wow, what is the meaning of life? And the only thing I have arrived at is that aside from family and those kinds of things, it's just to try and do some good with the energy you're given while you have it temporarily, and try to make the world a better place. And that sounds all starry-eyed and Pollyanna and all that kind of stuff, but I think it's far better than saying, well, the meaning of life is to accumulate as much material wealth as you can and stick it to the other guy whenever possible. So to me, folk music embodies those values. It embodies the fact that there's a huge viability to this history that's passed along from story to story and song to song. And also it backs up the concept that the wealth of knowledge is way more than gold, and how it can be measured in material things. The wealth of knowledge is those things that we've lived through. And oh my gosh, I'm going to tell you a happy story or a sad story, or here's a cautionary tale. Here's a song about how hard we struggled to help the next generation, so that the next generation understands that they themselves may not be a farmer or a miner or a slave, but they will know the struggles, the triumphs, the hardships, the joy of their forebears before, those that came before, without having to live it. But that's because people pass things along through song and story. And for me, it sticks better. I don't know if that.
No, I agree. And this is probably a really difficult question for you to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You've been singing and performing your whole life. Is there one or two songs in your repertoire or in that you've heard that anytime you hear them really elicits emotion for you personally more than other songs?
It's a song that I might play or that really elicits emotion from me, not necessarily that I wrote. Is that what you're saying?
Sure. Yeah.
Oh my God, there's so many.
I figured.
My mind goes quickly to some story songs because you know what? It's a fair question. It's a hard question to answer because there's so many. But I'll tell you, there's like, okay, so Harry Chapin's "Cats in the Cradle." Anybody who has children and listens to the story that's told by the singer of "Cats in the Cradle," you can't help but be moved if you're a sensitive person, because I see it unfolding with my own children. A child was born just the other day, came in the world the most natural way. And as the song goes on, it just keeps talking about like, and then the dad, you know, that he starts to get into the twilight of his life and he wants to spend a little more time with the son. And the son says, you know, Dad, I'd love to, but you know, I got all these other responsibilities. And it's a good song. It's a real song. And I mean, there's others too, like John Lennon's "There Are Places I Remember, Some for Better, Not Forever." Those kinds of songs are good. They're real. You know, Lennon wrote a lot of stuff that was sort of autobiographical in nature. And then if you get into the folk music genre or blues, you know, goodness me, there are a couple that I perform regularly by the guy by the name of Son House. Now, Son House is considered by many to be the father of folk blues. So he was a Delta blues player, played a bottleneck slide guitar often, not an educated man when it came to music, but hey, either am I. You know, it doesn't mean you can't make music. You don't have to be a symphony player to be able to emote or tell the story. And his songs, there are two where he doesn't even play the guitar. One's called "Grinning in Your Face," and the other one's called "John the Revelator." And I include those whenever I can in shows because I just love them. It's just the voice. It's like "Grinning in Your Face" is all about, you know, in the world you have human beings and you always feel like you might be being judged. I mean, so many times we let that creep into our psyche. Like, I wonder how they're judging me. Oh, I wonder how they think. When really, you know, as long as you're being a decent human being, it doesn't matter. You know, if you're being an axe murderer, then okay, you're going to get judged. But I mean, if you're being a decent human being and living a good life and trying to do whatever you can do to be a force for light and good, then you shouldn't worry about everything else. And his thing is, you know, no matter what, human beings, they're human beings. They're flawed. Things happen. So his story is, he tells it like this. Don't you mind people grinning in your face? Don't you mind people grinning in your face, Lord? You just bear who isn't mine. A true friend is hard to find. Don't you mind people grinning in your face? When I sing that, I get like a rush of it's just like, even just now, there's a message there. And then moving to the Irish Celtic thing, I love songs like they're sometimes sad, but I love the Scottish songs because of the war songs. Hey, we're valiant and we're rebellious, and we're going to take on the king's crown and have it all. You know, that kind of thing. And then the Irish have more of the laments, you know, like the Fields of Athenry.
Yes.
You like that one?
Oh my goodness, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
One of the times I went to Ireland, I actually asked my wife if we could. We drove to Athenry, and I found an old wall of an old ruin because there's plenty there. And I just sang that song because I had to, because that song touches me so deeply. Yes. And you know, I just sang that song live in concert the other night on a virtual concert, and I posed this question. You talk about songs that tell stories that are favorites of mine, are the ones that get through, that make you think to yourself, wow, that's my life. Now that song could be hundreds of years old, but it's still your life. Like, for example, that guy in that song, he was shuttled off by ship to Botany Bay because he stole a little bit of the Lord's corn so he could feed his children so they'd make it to the next morning. And for that, he was taken to Botany Bay, never to be seen again. I mean, wow. Yeah. And then I like the whiskey songs. They speak to me too. I don't know why. Just Whiskey Before Breakfast or Whiskey in the Jar. I love singing Whiskey in the Jar.
Yeah, they are great. It is absolutely it's not just it's fun to sing like you said, but it can really still talk to us hundreds of years later. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so for me, like everybody has a hard time answering a question like that, of course, because there's such a great range of music. But my problem is I like so many different genres of music and have
Yeah.
performed them and listened to them. Like if you'd be with me honestly in a day's time, the number of different kinds of music I listen to, you'd be like, wow, Dave, pick one. So for example, I was listening to, and I do listen to it probably once every 3 months. I was listening to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony the other day because I had something to do, a church service I'm working on, and they had this modernized version of the final movement of the Ninth Symphony, the Ode to Joy, and it still brings me to tears.
Yeah.
I research it. It doesn't, oh, friends, let us rejoice. The humanity of it,
Yeah.
So there are different genres, and if I had to list them, I'd have to go down and write different genres and then put them down. But that touches on a pretty good range of them for you, Doug.
No, it's a great answer. Absolutely. Dave, you do a lot of your own writing as well, whether it's songs, but you also have written prose and lots of poetry. What is your writing process like?
If it's songs, it could work one of three ways. One is mostly, and also, by the way, when my mind's most relaxed. So that means if I'm out walking or sometimes riding my bike, I just get in a trance. If it's a really nice day and I'm not thinking about weather, or I'm someplace I don't think about traffic, or I'm hiking in the same situation, or even cross-country skiing, or just walking, So the first of the three ways is it'll just kind of simultaneously all come to me at once. Like I'll be like, okay, well, this little thought just came in, just landed from the planet Neptune. There it is. Boom. That also happens, by the way, in the wee hours, sometimes in the middle of the night. And that's why I used to keep a pad and a pen by my bed and like a journal. And now I keep the iPhone there if I got to say a lyric to a song or I think of a tune or whatever. The second way it happens is if it's like it's for a specific thing, like you say to me, hey, I need a theme song for my show, or I need this or that or whatever, and then I will purposely set about, usually then what I'll do is I'll write the story first. I'll say what I'm trying to say in the verses. And as I'm doing that, it generally happens that where the music should go follows along, secondly. And then the third way is there'll be a certain style of music I want to write in. So whether it's classical or blues or rock or folk or mountain music or gospel, whatever, and it has a certain sound, and then I'll generally start with like how I want it to sound, and then I'll add lyrics later that make sense. So those are the three main ways.
Okay. And where does you have a work ethic and a drive like very few people I know? Where do you think that comes from?
ADD? No. No, my wife says her. It could be her, really, if I think about it. We had 4 children, and boy, when I was playing music and trying to hold down a day job at the same time, which I did for decades, you gotta, you're the breadwinner. I always took that's the traditional role, right? I always took the traditional role seriously. Boy, I better, keep busy. I don't know. I don't know. Really, aside from the practical thing, I think it's when I get these ideas that I want to create a show or create a song or create a poem or create something to write or whatever it is that I'm doing, like it just becomes like I just got to do it. I can be plenty lazy. Don't get me wrong. I learned to take like chill out and take naps sometimes for a couple hours, just listen to music during the day. Because I'm retired now from the day job and I can do that, and then I purposely try to block out anything creative going on. It's like, could you just stop now for a little bit? It's like there's an on switch turned on, and I don't want it to turn off because that means I'll probably have passed away. I'm glad that the creative ideas come. So it's just the way it is for me. It's a natural thing. It's a natural process.
Right.
I feel like, here's another part of it that I just think about. Now, this is a little maudlin, but to tell you the truth, when I was a very young guy, like maybe now after maybe I was like 18 or a little bit older, I forget, in my early 20s, my best and closest friend in life at that young age, he was unfortunately killed in a car accident. And I remember one of the things that I took out of that after the shock and grief was, holy, my gosh, life is really, truly is short. This is not This is not a story. I think it scared me. Like, I want to say, I better get things done. So I think it's my drive comes from, like, if you want to get something done, I mean, you better get it done. If you want to pass a story along, you better do it. If you, I mean, what are you waiting for? Keep doing it. Keep doing it as long as you can take breath, because this plane of existence is it's really short. It's a flicker, you know? So
yeah. No, I agree. I agree. Yeah. Dave, I have one last question before we move into the last part of our interview, and that is, given everything that we've gone through in 2020, what do you see in the future as far as COVID and post-COVID? How will all of this affect live performances in the future? What's your thoughts on that?
it's really hard to think about the freedom that we used to have of going to a concert, whether it was just in a little coffee house or whether you were going to see somebody in a big arena concert. It's really sobering. And my thoughts of it are, having lived through it. Well, I had just set up, I had retired basically from my day job. And I just set up with a gentleman by the name of Alex Meichner, touring musician. We were going to go tour out west of California and Texas and Ohio and Pennsylvania and New York and all these different places. Okay, good. I had it with my own bluegrass band, the Mountain Folk Band. I had it set up to go do a 7-day tour of Ireland. We were going to play at a festival there. And then COVID hit and changed all that. And I've been trying to scramble ever since, because for me, this goes back to one of the very first things you said. For me, it's kind of like always about giving. I don't feel complete, or I feel very nervous if I can't be giving. And I mean that by the sense of creating things and trying to help people with their own situation in life. The biggest reward I ever get is when a person comes up to me after a concert or something, or if I write something that touches them in some way, and they say basically something to this effect: gee, thanks, you helped take my mind off my cares and worries for this whatever period of time this was that you were entertaining. And when you remove that from my life anyway, I find a huge void. I find like sometimes I'm just in a void, just like in a vacuum. Like, I see that there's color and everything around me, but it's just kind of it's not a happy place. It's not a joyful place. It's not when you can go out and have a concert and get that instant feedback from people, and you create that circle. I've done the virtual concerts. They are nowhere close to being the spark and magic of what happens when you're with a live audience. I love a live audience, although I will admit, even to this day, it still gets me a little nervous sometimes, until I sense within however many minutes it takes or seconds, and it better not be more than a couple of minutes. Like, better be happening during the first song for me, or I get really nervous. It's like I look in the audience, I make eye contact, and I feel this sixth sense that I believe in for musicians and storytellers and whatever people that do this kind of thing. And that is, like, you feel the audience feedback coming back to you, and you feel the energy grow, and all of a sudden you're connected with that energy, and it forms like a circle, and it feeds off of itself. And that's why I'll work so hard at live shows to create that as quickly as I can during the show. Like, I really need that so I can feel really comfortable and do my best work for the audience. And in this virtual world, yuck. It's just not the same. All the technology and trying to monitor and stuff. So what do I think the future is? I think the future has to evolve back to getting to that normal give and take in live personal relationships. It just has to, whether it's vaccines or whatever. I said, because otherwise we're going to get really sick as a species. I think we cannot be isolated like this.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with you, and look forward to the day that we can, because Chris and I lost our whole schedule of performances as well in 2020, and we had a tour lined up to go to Germany, and we were all excited, and of course looking forward to everything, and we've done those virtual shows too. And yes, you were able to entertain and perform, but at the same time, like you said, if you can't feed off of the audience, because the audience feeds you as a performer as well, and that, of course, then produces an even better product in my mind. So I'm hoping, too, that at some point, in the future, artists can get back to doing what they need to do to help us as a society and as a people.
Yeah, we need it. We can't live in isolation like this for a prolonged period. It's already taken a huge toll, I think. I mean, it's depressing. I'm not an oh me, oh my kind of guy, like publicly, but when I'm sitting alone thinking about it. It's like, gee, man, this is just really bad. It's insidious. I mean, I wrote a song called The Devil's Virus. I don't know if you ever heard it. You'd probably like it, but it's this big, long story about like how the devil created the virus. And, but I'm not going to tell you the story. You have to listen to the song.
Sounds good. Well, Dave, we close out every episode with 10 quick questions that I ask all of my guests. And these are not to be, you know, personal, private questions. They're just topical questions. Are you ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, here we go. Question number 1. What is your morning drink of choice?
Kombucha.
Ooh, there you go. You're the first person that gave me that as an answer. Good job.
That's
Good
pretty
job.
much true. If I have it, that's my go-to drink. And I'm going to attend a class to learn how to make it so it doesn't cost so much for me.
There you go. There you go. Question number 2. This is going to be a difficult question for you to answer, but I'm curious to hear what you come up with. Who is a go-to musical artist or group of yours?
You mean to listen to?
Yeah, like, you know, you come home from a long day of work and you can only pick one band or singer to hit play on. Who would it be? Or who would one of them be?
The Beatles.
Okay, good. All right. Number 3, what movie can you watch over and over again and it never gets old?
Oh, God. Gee whiz. Deliverance? Because of the banjo playing. That's the only reason.
That was the first time anyone has given that as an answer. So there we go. All right. Number 4, what is the last thing that you read?
You mean a real book?
Anything.
Yeah, you're not going to believe this. It's a book that's actually made up of manuscripts, and it's called The Form of Curry. And it's a medieval cookbook collection of things that was used for King Richard III. And it's because it was the Christmas time and I was researching one thing and it led to the next, and I wanted to make this food for the commoners out of potatoes and onions and beans called maca. So that's the book, and I'm actually still reading it.
You know, Dave, you'll have to check this out. I just came across this about 2 weeks ago. There's a YouTube channel where a guy essentially takes recipes from that book and shows you how to make them and tells the history and the story behind the recipes. It's a really great YouTube channel. I'll send you the link at some point. The videos come out like once a week or so. It's good. It's really entertaining.
I love that. And to me, like you, I love history. So it's not just that there's this recipe there. It's that there's this whole story of what goes behind it. Like, you know, so that's interesting.
Right. Okay. What's your favorite pizza topping?
Green olives.
Oh, sounds good. I think I know the answer to this, but I'm asking it anyway. Number 6, laying on the beach or going for a hike?
Going for a hike.
Yeah, I knew that one. Okay. Oh, this one I'm really interested in. You have invited me over for dinner. What are you cooking?
I'm going to make you a traditional Zermatt Valley fondue with raclette cheese and some beautiful white wine like the Gewürztraminer or something like that.
I will be right over. That sounds delicious. Dave, you've done a lot of traveling in your life. So this question is, and I see what you have to say about this. What is a dream vacation destination?
Oh, anywhere in the mountains, anywhere in the Alps, anywhere where it has a spectacular scenery, and almost any time of year. As I get older, maybe not so much in wintertime, although I do still ski, but to see that culture and those traditions, because again, I like history, I like music. You can go to some of those little villages where the culture and traditions go back hundreds of years, and you can still go to a little pub and you can still hear live musicians play. Well, COVID aside, you can still hear that kind of stuff, and you can see things that were carved 100 years ago, and just it's just amazing to me.
Yeah.
I love it. Anywhere where I can discover history and traditions and folklore. I mean, if I could safely go to Egypt and explore the Valley of the Kings, I'd go there too. I mean, I might not like beaches, but I don't mind the sand.
Okay. What is something that you are afraid of?
Oh, the thing I'm most afraid of is running out of time.
Okay. That's a great answer. That is a really great answer. And the last question, what job other than the ones that you've had in the past would you love to have?
It's funny. I talk to my wife and I say, oh, you maybe with this part of my life, I should be an excavator somewhere where I'm digging up. I just watched a movie called The Dig, and they found these old Anglo-Saxon artifacts in England. I think like, how cool is that? That would be really neat to tie it all together, music and research of culture. And, so what, archaeologist?
Okay, sounds
or
good.
ethnomusicologist.
Oh,
An
yeah.
ethnomusicologist that specializes in archaeology, the finding of ancient flutes.
There. Well, I've heard from many people that, the generations that are in school right now are all going to be creating their own jobs in the future because these jobs don't exist yet. So It sounds like you just created one. So there we go.
Yeah.
Dave, you have been a voice of many things over the last 40 plus years in the Berks County area. I can't thank you enough for all of the hard work that you have done, not just with the music that you performed, but also all of the ways that you've helped spread the knowledge of the Pennsylvania Dutch culture over the years, whether it's performing at the Folk Fest or helping out at Christmas on the farm or Easter on the farm at the Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage Center. You are continually putting out content for people to enjoy and learn from. And like I said at the very beginning of this interview, I know firsthand that you have brought a lot of joy to thousands, if not millions of people over the years. And I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for everything that you've done. Thanks, of course, for coming on the show. This was, something very small in the pantheon of things that you've done, but it truly has made a huge difference in the lives of many, many people. Your voice, your music, your words really carry. And I know that they will live on long after your eyes have closed for future generations. So from the bottom of my heart, thanks so much, Dave, for coming on the show and doing everything that you've done. And I hope that spirit can continue going. Like you said, you just got to keep creating. And I know that you will. And I know that you will also continue to inspire people to do the same.
Thank you, Doug. And you inspire me because your work ethic is very resolute as well. A teacher, a purveyor of knowledge, a musician. You're the Renaissance guy as well. So I appreciate people like you. And thanks for inviting me to your show. It's been really a joy and a pleasure, and I appreciate having the chat.
Dave, thanks so much. And maybe we'll have you on again sometime in the near future. But until then, keep on singing, brother.
All right, you got it. I will do that. And I'll even throw in a yodel for you. Yo-hoo.
Thanks so much, Dave. Please take care, and we'll talk soon.
All right, Doug. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Doug's Front Porch, a conversational podcast with your host, Doug Maidenford. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. 5 stars only, please. Follow along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just look for Doug's Front Porch. Also, please feel free to tell all of your friends about the show, and I'll see you all next time on My Front Porch.